Councilors, mics are on. It being time, 7:02 on Monday, October 1st, I'd like to call the Finance Committee meeting to order. I do want to give some information relative to City Council President Dennis Ianeri. He had his surgery, hip replacement surgery this morning. At 9:30, his sister Cheryl emailed me and wanted to inform all of us that the surgery went extremely well. And he'll be home shortly to go through the process of rehabbing, and he'll be sitting back here really soon. So give our best wishes to Dennis, and I'm sure he'll be in touch soon. That being said, we're going to go on. Agenda item number 1, please.
Reappointment of Jason Mosley as a special police officer of the City of Brockton for a 1-year term ending September 2019. Invited, Jason Mosley.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
I'd
Councilor.
like to move that we take items 1 through 5 collectively. If the individuals are here, that's fine, but these are reappointments for our school police.
So motion on the floor is probably second. All in favor? All opposed? That motion carries. We'll read 2 through 5 collectively, please.
Reappointment of Kevin A. Smith as a special police officer of the City of Brockton for a 1-year term ending September 2019. Invited, Kevin A. Smith. Reappointment of Daniel J. Vaughn as a special police officer of the City of Brockton for a 1-year term ending September 2019. Invited, Daniel J. Vaughn. Reappointment of Julie Marshall as a special police officer of the City of Brockton for a 1-year term ending September 2019. Invited, Julie Marshall. Reappointment of Janet Frizzle Hancock as a special police officer of the City of Brockton for a 1-year term ending September 2019. Invited, Janet Frizzle Hancock.
Council, it's just a point of information. I did speak to Mr. Mosley the other day. I saw him at a youth soccer event, and I don't believe any of these individuals thought that they needed to appear tonight. And in past practice, past practice, just a reappointment. So motion on the floor is probably second. Favorable recommendation back to full council. All in favor? All opposed? That motion carries. Collectively, 1 through 5 are sent back favorable to the full City Council. Number 6, please.
Appointment of Julie Castor of 55 Oak Street, Hyde Park, Mass., to the position of part-time assessor for the City of Brockton. Invited, Julie Castor.
Good evening, Ms. Castor. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Good. Thank you for being here tonight. Do you have any statement or any opening that you'd like to share?
I just wanted to say that I'm extremely, I'm looking forward to the opportunity here in Brockton. I'm currently an assessor for the City of Boston. I have a young growing family. I have a 16-month-old and a 9-year-old, and I really want to pay my roots, and I feel like this is a perfect opportunity and place to do so.
Excellent. Any questions, councilors? Council Beauregard, please.
Thank you. Well, first of all, congratulations, and I think this is, I didn't expect you to be so young. So, good for you, and thank you. I had gone through your resume, and I just think, I'm sorry? You look young. Oh, okay, well, no, you're young. And it's really impressive, and no, this is great. I want to wish you the best. Congratulations. We look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Council. Any other questions, Council?
Motion recommend favorable.
Second.
Motion on the floor is properly second. A favorable recommendation back to the Council. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed, that motion carries. Favorable back to the full Council. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Good luck.
Good luck.
I'm going to go on to number 7, please.
Appropriation of $10,000 from unappropriated fiscal year 19 receipts of the General Fund, $10,000, to Finance Department Personal Services, $10,000. Invited, John A. Condon, Chief Financial Officer.
Mr. Connor, good evening.
Good evening, councilors. This order actually has a bit more to it than the appropriation. If you look what was filed in the clerk's office, it's a request to hire the new budget director, whom I'll introduce in just a moment, at top step for the ordinance salary. That was part of the order that was filed this summer, just truncated that a bit. So the person who I'm recommending is Karen Krival. She's sitting right behind me there. I'll bring her up in just a moment. The position is not a position that requires council approval, but the payment at top step as a hire is a requirement to get council approval. She's making more money than the top step, which is just about $94,500 right now. In the city of Cambridge, where she's a senior financial analyst and has been there for 16 years in positions of decent responsibility, including capital budgeting and operating budgeting. She has a lot of experience in school budgeting as well as DPW capital management. And when we advertised the position, we got about 10 applicants. We interviewed 3, and truthfully, there was one an internal candidate whom I'm very high on. I liked a lot, but Karen was head and shoulders our recommendation. the interview committee was Mel and me and Nicole Casseres. So I'm highly enthusiastic about this hire, and if you give me the approval to hire at that top step, she's a Randolph resident. We've spoken more than one time about the city residence requirement and the obligation to move in within 1 year. She's committed fully to doing it, and she's very excited to do it. So if you give me leave, I'd like you, before you make your vote, to give you a chance to introduce you to Karen.
Councilors, any objections to that? Seeing none,
No.
by all means.
So this is Karen Cabal, and hopefully she'll be our budget director.
Good evening, thank you for being here
Wow.
tonight. Thank you. Councilors, any questions?
Motion to recommend favorably.
Council Cruz on the motion.
I just wanna, we're, on the agenda, we have an appropriation.
Yeah.
We don't have the question, I believe we need to approve you hiring top staff, correct?
Yes, and the salary and the appropriation as well.
So all we're voting on right now is the appropriation. We need, and I did see the paperwork came that way, I just wanna make sure that we're doing everything we need to do. The way I read the agenda, we're only voting on the appropriation for the dollars.
Oh, thank you.
Okay,
The order will truncate any Scrivener's errors.
it does look like that it was probably just abbreviated, not completely on the agenda.
How you doing?
Because as I read the order, it came to the agenda last week
When are you going to start?
to,
When are you supposed to start?
the director of top staff.
Council Monahan, when you filed that was the intent of the filing?
Yes.
Thank you.
So actually, should we have this read into the,
Sure, we'll have it read into the record.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
thank you. I just want to make sure we're covered.
Absolutely.
Ordered that the following named sum be and the same is hereby appropriated as the same was submitted by the mayor as follows: appropriation of $10,000 from unappropriated fiscal year 19 receipts of the Gen Fund, $10,000, to Finance Department Personal Services, $10,000, in order to provide sufficient funding to hire a new budget director at the top step salary. Furthermore, as recommended by the Chief Financial Officer, hereby requests, in accordance with Section 2-131 of the revised ordinances of the city, that the City Council approve that the hiring salary for Karen Preval be at the top step of the ordinance for the budget director of $95,467.
Thank you. Councilors, I entertain a motion with the order that was just read and the terms stated therein.
Move to recommend favor.
Okay.
So motion on the floor is properly seconded. Favorable recommendation back to the full council as stated therein. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed, that motion carries. Favorable back to the full council. Thank you very much. Good luck. Congratulations.
Good luck, yeah.
We go on to agenda item number 8, and councilors, please be aware that the fire chief, Mike Williams, is here on this matter. He's unfortunately wasn't invited. He was left off unintentionally, but he is here tonight. We thank the chief for being here. Please, Mel.
Appropriation of $671,897 from Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, and the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, to City of Brockton Fire Department, FEMA DHS Grant Fund, and an appropriation of $67,189 from unappropriated estimated receipts of fiscal year 19 of the General Fund to Fire Department FEMA DHS Grant Match. Invited, John A. Condon, Chief Financial Officer, Stephen Hook, Jr., Director, Brockton Emergency Management.
Good evening, chief. How are you? Thanks for being here tonight.
Just to clarify, first of all, this has nothing to do with FEMA.
Oh.
It has nothing to do with Mr. Cook. This was an AFG grant, Assistance to Firefighters Grant. It was awarded to us back in July.
Assistance.
It is a grant that we applied for several times in the past. Unfortunately, we did not receive the grant until this year, which we're very happy about. If we hadn't received that grant, it's most likely I would have had to ask the city and the city council to come forward with this full amount of money. So as you can see, this is very expensive equipment. We received basically a 90% grant. The federal government asked the city to match that with 10%, so you can see those numbers. So I'm here to speak on, if you have any questions on what is going to be purchased, what this will do for the fire department along that aspect, and Mr. Condon is here to speak on the match.
Okay,
Thank you, chief. We'll go with Council Beauregard, please.
thank you. Thank you, Chief, for being here. Okay. Actually, so we'll let you discuss what you're going to purchase with this. And do you believe, because you had that higher rating with, recently with the insurance, that maybe that helped this along?
Counselor, I'm not sure on that.
Oh, okay.
I certainly would like to think so.
All right.
Yeah, I'd like to think that was a helping factor. But there's several grades and benchmarks that you have to meet in order to get these grants.
Okay.
Everything has to be filled out properly,
Makes sense.
applied for properly along those lines. So like I said, in the past, we just missed it by a few points, let's say.
Really? Okay.
This year. And I do want to express my appreciation for Deputy Chief Scott Albanese. He had a large amount of work to do on this grant, and he really deserves a lot of
Oh,
credit.
good. Okay, thank you. And the equipment's going to be?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's good, no, it's,
It's our breathing apparatus.
Okay,
So it's
all
the
right.
Scott Air Packs. We'll be purchasing 90 of those. Those run in the neighborhood of $7,000 apiece. Each Scott unit will have 2 tanks, and it'll purchase new face pieces for all the firefighters on the entire department as well.
oh, wow, okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Cruz, followed by Counselor Rodriguez, please.
Just a quick question, Chief. How old are the ones we're working with now?
We've bought them at all different stages, so they're all different. I would say some of the older ones in the teens,
Oh,
as far as
really?
the age goes.
Great. Good, thank you. Thank you, Deputy Chief Albanese, too. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Rodriguez.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief,
Good evening.
that was one of the, actually, when you said that you're going to buy face masks for every single, you're talking about the entire man force, basically.
Exactly.
What about the breathing apparatus? According to the order, you're only getting 90?
Right, we need one for each riding position, not each firefighter.
Okay.
Oh,
If you
okay.
add up each seat on my apparatus, it doesn't even come up to 90, but to cover.
Just to cover.
Spares and things like that, we came up with a number 90.
But as far as the mask itself, we're actually
Each
getting one for
firefighter
every
will have
single
their very
one?
own.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a sanitary thing these days.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. And you know what? I've mentioned this often on this body, that we have to start going outside and thinking outside of the box, in the sense to go after funding that exists for everybody else. And I am glad that we're not getting these, we're not getting these onesies and twosies that we normally get in the city. Because sometimes it's embarrassing when we sit here and we're discussing grants, and you see some of these other communities getting enormous amounts of money, both from the state and the federal. And I'm glad that at least from this one aspect of things, we're getting what the city deserves, and your men and women in the fire department. And thank you, and please continue to look, because
Yeah.
it's a lot harder to come back and ask us for stuff, because we don't have that much to give. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselors, any other questions? No, hold that, please. Chief, if you could just explain again, FEMA has nothing to do with it, so what is the grant? Because we have to amend the order that was written
A
out.
Federal Firefighters Assistance Grant,
Federal.
or Assistance to Firefighters Grant, an AFG grant is what it's called.
No, it says federal.
Counselors, we're going to need a hand vote for an amendment to revise the order, replacing Federal Emergency Management Agency FEMA with what the chief just said. I need a form of a motion, please, to amend.
And, excuse me, what's the verbiage?
Federal firefighters.
An AFG, Assistance to Firefighters Grant.
Okay.
From what department? FEMA?
No,
No.
It's from the,
Not FEMA.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to strike FEMA and replace that with Assistance to Firefighter Grant.
Second.
On that motion, Mr. Chairman, what department is that coming from?
no, it's a grant going to the fire department.
I understand that. but what I'm saying,
it's a
where's it
federal
coming
grant, Counselor.
From which department within the federal government?
Homeland Security?
Is it Homeland Security?
No. Why would it be Homeland Security?
You think it would be environment?
No, it would be public safety.
I understand that it's going to the fire department, but what is it coming from, basically, as far as from what federal arm?
Mr. Connor, do you know that?
I'm looking to see if I can see it in the original communication.
Thank you.
Well, actually, it says it comes from both FEMA and Department of Homeland Security.
Oh, it does.
Right, that's the Scrivener's error. That's erroneous, so
I think Department of Homeland Security is probably correct.
Okay.
But why?
No, actually, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I
Counselor,
believe that all we really need to strike is 2 City of Brockton Fire Department FEMA DHS grant fund. It should be just Brockton
Just
Fire
Brockton Fire
Department grant fund.
Okay.
In other words, it comes from listening there, I believe it comes from the from FEMA, but it's not going to BEMA.
I don't get it.
Correct.
Are we sure it's coming from FEMA?
No, that's the paperwork, Mr., it comes from FEMA.
Detroit Board of FEMA and Department of Homeland Security.
So I'd like to, I'll do a new,
please
new
make,
amendment.
yeah, please make
So
a,
the amendment would be after 2 City of Brockton Fire Department FEMA / DHS grant fund, it would just be 2 City of Brockton Fire Department grant fund, correct? Correct, Mr. Conner?
we have a motion, 1 minute, is there
I'll
a second?
second that then.
All in favor, please raise your hand to the amendment. All opposed, motion carries. Now, we entertain a motion favorable as amended back to full council. Is there a motion?
Make a motion, favor recommendation.
As
Second.
amended back to the full
As amended,
council?
back.
Is there a second, Mr. Lally? All in favor?
Okay.
All opposed, it carries. It's favorable recommendation back to full council as amended. Thank you, chief.
Thank you.
Councilors, we're going to go on to agenda item number 9, please.
Ordered, in accordance with Section 2-131 of the revised ordinances, that the City Council authorize the Chairman of the Board of Assessors to offer a hiring rate at the top step for the position of part-time member Board of Assessors for Julie Castor. Invited, John A. Condon, Chief Financial Officer, John O'Donnell, Chairman, Assessors.
Mr. O'Donnell, good evening.
Good evening. I'd also like to start Julie at the top rate. It's a three-step position. It's only an increase of $1,350. It's in our budget already.
That
Council
was my
Cruz,
que-
followed by Council Lally,
That was
please.
my question. You don't need an
But-
appropriation. You have the money in your budget, and it's just a
Yes.
matter of what she was making in Boston compared to
Yes.
what the
She's
Thursday.
What was that hard dollar, 1,300?
It's like $1,342.
Okay. Council
Thank
Cruz,
you.
you satisfied?
All set.
Council Lally, please.
I was going to move favorable.
Okay.
That was good. Favorable.
I was about to say it.
Trying to be silly.
He's trying. Favorable recommendation back to full council. It's been properly second. All in favor? All opposed? That motion carries. It's a favorable recommendation back to the full council. Thank you, Mr. O'Donnell. Have a good night. I'm going to go on to number 10, please.
Ordered, in compliance with the provisions of the election laws, notice is hereby given that the state election will be held on Tuesday, November 6, 2018, at the designated polling places. Invited, Cynthia Scrivini, Executive Director, Elections/Registrars.
Council, Cindy doesn't need to be here. This is
Motion
just,
to
yeah, this is just dotting the i's, crossing the t's. There's a motion on the floor, probably second favorable recommendation back to the council. All in favor? All opposed? That motion carries. Favorable recommendation back to the full council. Mr. Monahan, it's good to see you tonight. We haven't
Doing
seen
the
you in a
people's
while.
work, you
You
know.
been all right?
That's
Yeah?
right. Hey, gas company, gotta work, gotta do that work, baby.
Oh, that's good to talk about. We're going to go on to agenda item number 11, please.
Ordered that the current moratorium relating to marijuana retail sales, cultivation, distribution, or other related activities enacted by the City Council pursuant to Section 27-24.3 of the revised ordinances of the City of Brockton shall not apply to those medical marijuana dispensaries, medical marijuana treatment centers, medical marijuana manufacturers, or medical marijuana retail dispensaries currently located within the city and which are licensed or provisionally approved or have provisional or final registration and/or are grandfathered under 935 CMR 500. Invited, Shannon Resnick, Legislative Counsel to the City Council, Dennis R. Aranieri, City Council President, Winthrop H. Farwell Jr., Councilor at Large.
Attorney Resnick, good evening. I know this is a joint order by the President, Mr. Farwell. Winthrop, do you want to say anything before?
Yeah,
Attorney Resnick?
I'll just be very brief, trying to speak for Councilor Ianieri and me. We have 2 establishments in the city that are licensed. They've been through all of the necessary scrutiny by the state. They've literally complied with everything that could possibly be expected of them at the state level. In the case of In Good Health, and I just met Mr. Noble tonight for the first time, obviously, they've been up and running as a dispensary with an unblemished record from what I have been able to find out through my research, and the other entity is going to be poised to open up. So rather than treat them as we would a fledgling operation that would just be applying to the state, would possibly be licensed, it would seem to me prudent and very fair and reasonable
That makes
if
sense.
we eliminate them or excise them from the moratorium. Let's get them up and running. Let's find out, number one, what will the revenues be? What will the demand for the product be? They might be a very good, shall we say, beginning point to find out how successful this is going to be. So when this was first asked of me, by the news media, I might add, I contacted Attorney Resnick, and I said, what do you think? And initially, I think we felt, well, this wasn't the right thing to do. And then there was some more conversation with Attorney Bridges in the city solicitor's office. And then I think counsel who were here, Attorney McCluskey and Attorney Burke, they went back and forth. And contingent upon certain things which our legislative council would like agreed to by all parties, they could be up and running and bringing revenue into the city sooner than other entities who do not have a location yet, who have not been through the state scrutiny, and are not prepared to begin the retail marijuana sales industry, which is obviously just kicking off in this city and in this state. So that's it in summary, and I would certainly defer to legislative counsel. And if councilors have questions and there's no objection, we do have the two attorneys representing the two entities who are eligible for, just by virtue of them being dispensaries, either licensed or provisionally licensed, to answer any questions.
Thank you, Counsel Falwell. Attorney
you.
Resnick.
I just want to comment that when this first got presented to me, my inclination was to advise the council to not go forward with it, because what you would be essentially doing is allowing retail operations for adult use in the city of Brockton without any local ordinances in effect to regulate that operation. That will still be the case if this moratorium is lifted. But since we've talked about this order, we've discussed through council some safeguards in order to allow if the moratorium is lifted, to allow In Good Health to operate retail sales. The protections and the safeguards that the city council would have and the city of Brockton would have is that they are still always regulated by the state. So whatever the state dictates their standards are, those would likely be the only standards that they would be operating under. There has been a proposal for an agreement between In Good Health and the city of Brockton. I've reviewed it. My only caution to the city council on it is that it doesn't appear to me to require city council approval. As you know, the mayor and the solicitor's office can go ahead and engage in certain contracts on behalf of the city without approval of the city council. And we saw that happen with the host agreements. And Councilor Sullivan and I.
That was a waste of my time and your time and Ian Aries' time. Waste.
And I agree. We were brought in for
Wasted.
discussions, and by the time the agreements were finalized, I was no longer involved. And it became clear to me and Councilor Sullivan that perhaps we were given the initial respect, but as far as fine-tuning the final piece of agreement between the host, with the host agreement, I was not involved. My caution to the city council is that I don't see this happening here, but there's nothing, if we lift this moratorium today, there's nothing that prohibits the solicitor's office and the mayor from going ahead and entering into a private agreement with IGH. I don't anticipate that will happen, but I also didn't anticipate to not be involved in the negotiations of the host agreement. A moratorium is allowed in this instance. Just want that mentioned. The AG's counsel to municipalities includes that so long as towns and cities have a moratorium in place for the purposes of vetting out ordinances, then it's okay to have a moratorium right now. We are allowed to require R&Ds, even though they have kind of like a jump ahead of the licensing availability. It's as if they can grab license 1 and 2. We can still require them to go through our licensing process. What the proposed agreement does anticipate is that all of that information that they would have provided for in the application process, all the fees that they would have otherwise be required to pay, they'll go back. As soon as we say what those ordinances are, they're going to agree to adhere to those. So that part of it, you don't lose the financial benefit of the application so long as that agreement that's being proposed is what eventually gets signed off on. And we are allowed to put them through our licensing process. Just because they have the priority grab-it licenses 1 and 2, the city council can still vet them out as an applicant for an RMD. So that's just my caution to the city council. I'm not sure how much leeway the city of Brockton will have, irrespective of what the state regulations say. And I also cautioned that I'm not sure how much of a benefit this provides. The ordinance committee, assuming that we have the ordinances done and approved, it seems as if we'd be able to have it finished within this legislative session. We do have a meeting to finalize the licensing process and the time and place, the time and manner parts of the legislation. We are on an agenda, I believe it's October 18th.
Yep.
So assuming that that gets passed, that speeds up the process, and then the next thing that the city needs to work on is the place, which is the zoning aspect. I don't think that there is anything that the city can do relative to the zoning for IGH. They'll be considered grandfathered in their operation. Can't be outzoned of retails. That would be part of my counsel anyways. So in sum, what am I saying here is that what seems to be the furthest down the line is the zoning, and I don't think that's going to affect their operation. So I don't think that anything the city council does, you know, what we work on in October and November will have any effect on them there. The licensing aspect of it is, they would agree to whatever our licenses are anyways. But just in practice, I just have to legally advise that you will, by lifting this moratorium, you will be allowing a retail operation in Brockton without local ordinances to govern the vetting of their application and without the monitoring and regulation of their operations. But they are subject to doing the same of those at the state level. So they will still go through the state application process, and they will still be subject to state regulations, but not on the city level.
Thank you, Counsel.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask just one clarifying question? If we were to do this, we'd have to find something extraordinary to say you've qualified through the state, but we're not going to grant you, I assume, a local retail license. Am I?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. It would be, and I don't think you'll find that with In Good Health. I don't think you're going to find a reason to deny their application. But it's not just the application, it's the sales, and it's the regulations. It could be a small little test period, but you're talking about a couple of months. And I'm not sure how much data will be collected when you have everyone fleeing to one site as opposed to the potentially 8 sites in Brockton. And then the other thing that I think is important to mention is that this morning I did email my concerns to Phil and Megan, and I just haven't heard back from them. I wanted them to have the opportunity to hear my opinion as to the fact that my concern is that this agreement has been proposed to be entered into after the moratorium or simultaneous to. I would prefer simultaneous to. But I would advise the city council to take action on the moratorium if the agreement happens after the fact. I'm fine if it happens at the same time, but if it's going to happen after the fact, I would caution the city council because I was excluded relative to the negotiations with the host agreement, and in full candor to the city council, I have concerns about what the host agreements that have been proposed. It's missing so much that I think would benefit the
Counsel,
city.
just point of information, just for those that may not be aware, the council president, Ian Airy, Attorney Resnick, and I was a designee. We sat in on a meeting at the mayor's office. It was stressed to us, no circumstance, there's no misinformation here. It was clear to us there would be a follow-up meeting to take into consideration what I offered. I offered quite a bit that day, as Shannon and Dennis. That follow-up meeting never happened, and it was executed. Again, it was a waste of our time And, you
And
know,
I sent revisions, and
I won't do that again, I'll
and I
tell you
said,
that.
I think you're missing some really important indemnification, and I think you're missing some very important insurance language, and that they just entered into the host agreement without that counsel from us. So it's up to the city council. I'm not a resident of Brockton, but I just wanted you guys to be fully informed as to
could
what
always
this
move here. We have a
moratorium
lot of houses for sale. You could always come here.
is. But,
Need more voters.
yeah, so it's just, that's what the legal effect is.
Well, just final comment, neither one of you should have been surprised about the exercise of executive control. I mean, I'm putting it gingerly, so, thank you.
Thank you, Council.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
so-
We're going to have Council Derrencourt followed by Council Cruz, please.
Good. In regard to this, what could be the consequences? Let's say that we approve this. That's my fear. I mean, you said that regardless what happened, the mayor can actually go ahead and do it. So, what could be the consequences
If
in
you're
regard to not having any regulations in regard to this thing?
Let's say your ordinances do not go through during this legislative session. That was my other concern. And this is partly what I argued to Phil and to Megan. I was trying to wait to hear back, was that because it is an unmeasured agreement, it's my opinion that it should come before the city council, because it has the potential to continue. I can't guarantee that the legislation that's being worked on in the ordinance the ordinance committee will be approved by the full city council. So the risk is that you could have this operation going for an infinite duration. It's contingent upon the city passing legislation.
Yeah, but the thing is that how do we regulate whatever they will be selling without having an ordinance that can justify that? That's my point in regard to sort of like giving them the green light without even having anything that can say this is what you can do and this is what you can do.
The other aspect of what I'm going to say is regulating is contract-based. It's what's in the host agreement that was negotiated between the mayor's office, city solicitor, and IGH. So there are provisions in the host agreement that provide for payment of the taxes and what would happen if they leave their operations within a year, types of benefits for hiring city employees, those types of things. They would be subject to that contract. That's separate. You would not have any city, you at this time do not have any city regulations ordained relative to adult retail sales of marijuana.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, to you through the members, I personally had an opportunity to visit In Good Health, and of course David was there. Based on my observation, I think they are doing a wonderful job. So my intent is not whether or not we should give it to them, but rather sort of like the consequences beyond that. So I guess the fact that we have no laws or no ordinance that can actually say this, this is what we can do and this is what we cannot do, I think it could be like very detrimental to the consequences that we may face. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that they're not doing a good job, but how do we make sure that by approving this, the city will be able to saying that, okay, you violate this, we're going to come back and fix that. So that's my biggest fear, because I believe that In Good Health, has been doing a wonderful job. And like I said, I personally tour, their buildings and stuff like that. But my biggest, it's not a fear, but my biggest issue right now is because we don't have anything to hold. I mean, I have nothing at all that can say, you know what, I voted no on this because of that, or I voted yes on this because of that. So that's my fear. And of course, like you said, regardless what happened, I'm assuming that the mayor can go ahead and do whatever he wants. So if the mayor does have that power, I would give the mayor the power. I would just let the mayor do it.
So the mayor right now would not have the power because we have
Okay.
the moratorium. That's
Okay.
giving us that little hold, let us figure it out within the city council. I also didn't want my speech today to be directed as in, don't approve this order. The ways that you can, consider voting for this is one. You could also consider doing like what we do with our repair shops. What are your hours of operations going to be? Do you agree to X, X, and X? I'm sure we could take all of those little concerns that you might have and put that into the agreement that's being proposed with IGH. That's absolutely a possibility, but it's by contract, which is different than having it be by local ordinance. So there are avenues to have this go forward with no issue. I just am concerned that if it's the position of the mayor or the position of the solicitor's office, that we, or specifically I, will not be part of that negotiating process. I cannot guarantee that to the city council today.
Okay, so I mean, based on your knowledge and according to research you've done, do you believe it would be wiser for us to wait until we pass the ordinance to move, to move on with this? Or I'm just asking you this personally as the city, the council
The
attorney.
fortunate thing is that as a lawyer, I can advise to you whether or not it's a lawful thing to do. It is lawful to lift the moratorium as it relates to retail operations and medicinal sites. But it is also lawful not to do it. So I'm saying that you have the opportunity to make a legal decision, and what that decision is up to the will of the council. I'm here to inform you as to what happens if you vote favorably and what happens if you don't vote favorably. And if you want to vote favorably, here are the things that could help the city. And if you don't want to vote favorably, here are the reasons why you can justify that vote.
So in regard to the letter that you sent to the city solicitor this morning, I'm assuming that you voiced your concern based on this, or
I
what
did.
was, okay.
I did. And it's the same thing that I'm voicing right now. My concern is not with the operation. It's just that from what I could read, was that there was interest in having this be presented to the city council under the suspension of rules, which is, if one person votes no tonight, that doesn't go forward. What I cautioned was that, when I was thinking of it, is when would this become in effect? Would it become in effect as soon as the full city council votes the October 9th general body meeting? And if we don't have an agreement placed with IGH by that time, does that mean that that agreement's going to be entered into afterwards? And what I'm trying to inform the city council is that my worry is that if it's entered into afterwards, I cannot guarantee that any of your concerns or any of the things that you would want in that agreement would be incorporated into that agreement, because I was excluded after the initial process of the host agreement negotiations. So you can.
So I mean, the question is, what was the reason you were excluded from that? Do you know?
I honestly have no idea. I don't know. I don't know if maybe they thought they'd had all the working pieces of a host agreement, so they moved forward on it. I had found some things that I had hoped would be in it. Otherwise, the agreement's great. I think the agreement that's there works fine. There were just a few pieces.
It could have been better.
That I would have added.
Mr. Chairman, it is so unfortunate, given the fact that, In Good Health has been doing a wonderful job, serving and paying taxes in our community. But what somewhat, surprised me is that I feel like we need more information in regard to this. And like I said, I don't have any problem in regard to voting a certain way in this, but my biggest fear is that you, as, the attorney, I'm not a lawyer, I feel like we should definitely take your advice into consideration, so given the fact that, we don't know. The possibility of not knowing what to expect could be, so detrimental to whatever you want to do. But at the same time, I don't believe that In Good Health should be penalized because of that. So I just want to make that point. I'm more than happy to vote a certain way to give, them access to do it. But my biggest fear is that, not knowing what to do or not knowing what's coming next. So that's my fear. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Counselor.
If I
Counselor,
could add one more point.
Yes.
If you wanted to read, the other way I thought is how I could inform the city council that they could vote favorably to this, is that I thought perhaps maybe you could condition, condition upon the execution of an agreement with IGH relative to X, and X. But my worry in doing that is that a contract would precede a city order. And that kind of worries me. What that means is whether a city is operating fairly by making a contract and then an order, rather than an order than a contract. I'm fine if it's a simultaneous, where they're signing the agreement the night the city council approves it, but I'm not sure there's much you can do to amend this agreement to, I guess, make those types of concerns, make me feel more comfortable with those concerns.
thank you, Attorney. Counselor Cruz, followed by Counselor Ezek, followed
Thank
by
you.
Counselor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Attorney Resnick. Just want to make sure I get a couple of points right. First of all, under the state regulations that the Cannabis Commission has put forth, the medical marijuana is, they're actually priority, and we can't deny them a license other than if they had an issue that they would probably already have lost their license, correct?
So the way I read it is that if you have licenses available, that's why I'm trying to describe it as they grab licenses 1 and 2.
Right, but they were but that's the way it's written now. If we passed all the ordinances in October 18th and did the final reading, the 25th of November, first week of November, we get everything done. 20 people apply for licenses.
They grab 1 and 2.
They get 1 and 2 anyways.
Yep.
So no matter what, these two, one is already open, one is provisionally licensed by the state, they will get the first 2 licenses. We can't say, oh, no, we like these other 6 applications better.
Well, you could, exactly. So you could vet their application and deem them, and I agree that it would be like some serious circumstances that you would deem them,
But they would already have had
they would already have been vetted by the state,
better.
too. That's partly.
That's my next question. But, no, but I mean, the issues that we would be able to deny them 1 and 2 license, they would already have probably been fined by the state, or they were pre-existing conditions.
Correct.
We can't say they're not going to get the first 2 licenses.
Unless something has come up that the state's not aware of, or that the city has had interworkings with IGH that, really interferes
Right,
with a good faith vote.
other than an issue with their current license or
Right.
something, provided they pass all the flying colors, they get the first 2 licenses, correct?
Yes.
So even if we start everything at ground zero in 2 months, say we pass everything and we still have the moratorium, we lift it when we pass everything, they get the first 2 licenses.
They,
Outside of any
yes.
broken law.
So I don't want the city council, they can still vote no on their application. I'm just not sure you're going to have just grounds in voting no, from what I've seen today.
So okay, because I'm very confused on that then, because outside of them having an issue which would already have come up under their current license, not paying the taxes or, selling to people without medical ticket, anything like that, outside of a reason that we could take their license away anyways, well, the state would be taking the license away anyways, they are priority under the current regulations.
I'm trying to say that they have priority in applying, but I don't think that makes them a priority applicant. So that they have, if there are licenses available, they get to jump the line, like they did with the vetting of the state process. They got to jump the line and be vetted there. They'd get that same opportunity with the city of Brockton. So, yes, you would have to consider their application before you considered D, E, and F.
Okay. And again, outside of a reason to take the current license away, actually, at this point,
Yep.
they will get 1 and 2.
Yeah,
In other words, we can't say no because we like the other 6
correct.
applications.
Correct.
They get prior, okay. If we lift this tonight, that just means they can then continue the state process. The state has not given out the licenses yet, correct?
But the state would be quick to act, because really what they're waiting on is a certification from the city
From the city.
saying that they are in compliance with the local regulations, which would be true, because there are none. And then they'd have to do their community outreach form. I don't think they've done that yet.
And so then they open up, and we don't have any regulations yet, and so they're open from 9 in the morning till 7 at night, but we put regulations in 6 at night. They would then have to,
They'll agree to be grandfathered. That's the other part that they're showing. I'm not trying to disregard what IGH is proposing here. They're saying whatever you guys eventually agree to, we'll agree to too. They're agreeing to be grandfathered in to whatever the city council. Yep.
council. So what we'd be saying is, okay, we're gonna let you start, these two start, and in 8 weeks, we're done, and you're gonna have to change and close at 6 at night because that's what we came up with. You're gonna have to do X, Y, Z because that's what we decided.
Yep.
And they would have to do that.
Yep.
Okay.
And there is what is being worked on the host, the ordinance, really does not have to do with other than
Host agreement.
Correct. So there will be a little bit of fees based off of the application fees. But largely the revenues is the host agreement, which has already been executed. So there is a substantial revenue that will be coming in to the city.
Right. What
through
we're
the
gonna
host
put-
agreement.
What we're gonna put into ordinance is gonna be zoning,
Yep,
which they're grandfathered in because of that.
correct.
We're gonna put in some regulations, but nothing that supersedes the state regulations anyways.
Yep.
And the host agreement is not the responsibility of the city council, even,
Correct.
correct, so,
But my other caution to you is that's assuming that what is worked on in ordinance does get passed by this council this legislative year.
so then the only fear is that we get into another, although, no, it wouldn't go away at the end of the year, we're not,
Carry all the way
we
into
carry
January.
over, because we're in the middle of a,
You're keeping your session, correct?
yeah, so if it took till January, it took till January.
Yep, but then you might have a resident who complains and wants the licensing commission to go in and, check out if there's a violation. We'll have to rely on the state for that, which could
Which
very
we're
well
gonna
be
be,
fine.
we're gonna be relying on the state anyways for
Correct.
quite a bit of that
So
anyways.
as long as you're well informed, that's all I care about.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Councilor Azak, followed by Councilor Rodriguez, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Attorney Resnick. Councilor Cruz actually covered a lot of my questions, but say, I'm just going to ask a very simple question. Say that we don't pass this. Can In Good Health turn around and file a suit against us or the city? Is that their right? Is that something that is?
Of course. But that would be a right of, I would say, any applicant. I don't think IGH has any special claim. I'm just saying that if, in any legal claim, if someone feels that they've been denied a property right, they're entitled to file a lawsuit. But if I can come back to what I tried to mention at the beginning, and this is some of the language that I shared with Wynn, it's language that comes directly from the Attorney General's office, and it says, what can municipalities do right now? And that language specifically says that, yes, we can subject the RMDs to a moratorium so long as we are, in good faith, working on vetting the ordinances. So I think that there is protection from the Attorney General's office. I don't think that the City Council will do anything legally wrong one way or the other on this vote. That's what I'm trying to say. It's lawful to do it. It's lawful not to do it.
Thank you. And you mentioned earlier that we could add amendments. Would that need to be done tonight or if it's?
It would just be my caution to do it before a vote by the full City Council. I did see some emails that it would be anticipated that anything that we'd recommend would be minor. I don't know that for sure, so I'm not entirely sure. I haven't been involved in the negotiations, so I've just seen the proposal.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Rodriguez, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Shannon? I don't quite agree with what Councilor Cruz was saying in terms of the licensing, that it's an automatic thing.
It's not.
It's not, because they still have to go through a host agreement, and that host agreement has to be accepted by the city, so it's not an automatic thing. And they still have to comply with every single item that we put in on that ordinance. So it's not just because they're in the business of doing this, it doesn't mean that they're automatically going to get a license, even though we say, we're expecting the host agreements to be X, Y, and Z for them to say, you know what, we're not going to pay you anything because we're grandfathered for a license. That's not the way it works. They still have to go through that process
They do have the host agreement.
of presenting that to the city.
Yeah. There's a host agreement.
But there might be one, but what I'm saying is that if we hold this off until the ordinance is passed, then we see that host agreement, because we put that in the as one of the conditions that we would have in the application process.
Correct, but you can see that host agreement now. You're the City Council. It's a contract
Where is
entered
it?
into by the mayor. I think I have a copy of it. I can forward it to you.
Okay.
I might have. I actually am not entirely sure. I have a copy of the signed.
Well, to be honest with you, if they do have a host agreement, then we should have seen this. I mean, just to be on up and up in a sense, if there's an agreement that's already been struck, we've been working diligently on this particular ordinance to get this thing through. I think it doesn't make any sense that the body that actually is looking to pass the ordinance in the city doesn't see that host agreement. Because I think it serves us well, because one of the fears that I have is that later on down the road, let's say 2 or 3 months down the road, we pass the ordinance comes into effect, and we have new businesses now applying for licenses. I don't want those businesses to come back and say, well, you gave us an unfair advantage over what you did with those other 2 businesses. Just because they get to stand in front of the line, it doesn't mean that they get whatever the good crumbs that come down the pipeline, and then everybody else has to basically scrunch to do what they need to do. I want to make sure that that's also very clear, because that's a concern that I have, that it opens us up in terms of a city to say, are we being fair to all businesses applying for licenses in our community?
Correct. And that's not necessarily legal in nature, but that is something that you can consider, is that you're going to be allowing one site to, get a 2-month leap start, as opposed to all the other applicants who may be interested, have to start from ground zero, and have to all get up and running around the same time, having a competitor already open for, 2 months or so.
Mr. Chairman, just as a point of information to my
Council
colleague,
Fowler.
I believe I have a copy of the host agreement within Good Health. It's on the internet. It's executed by the mayor and the CEO. It calls for, and I can be corrected if I'm wrong, 3% of revenues which go to the mayor, and he can use it for one of 3 purposes, and one of them is addiction treatment centers, and ironically, money is given to the Champion Plan, where he sits on the board of directors. You should be so lucky to have revenue coming in, and you could give it to the Cape Verdean Association. So this is a very, very...
That bit was not in there when Councilor Sullivan and I were involved.
Okay,
But
so it was taken out?
It was just discussed about, where would community impact fees, be fortunate enough to go to in the
I
city.
don't know what was taken out when.
But-
We
Well,
weren't
it-
privy
it-
to that.
I guess my point is, I'll look at my copy, I'll get it to you, hopefully it's the same one, I'm sure we can get a copy from the law department, but the host agreement is a big deal, because it basically becomes a political fund from which you can reward various people with substantial revenues that don't go through the council.
And to the detriment, to defer to what IGH is doing, they are agreeing to pay a substantial amount of money and a substantial amount of revenues to the city. It's a financial win for the city. That's absolutely there. And, you would, over the next 2 months, be able to reap that benefit, if this moratorium was lifted.
Well, you know what? I don't have a problem with lifting the moratorium, to be honest with you. As a matter of fact, I had a conversation with David not too long ago about this, but I was actually looking at it from a 3-prong approach. And I think I talked to you about that in terms of the retail piece, the growing piece, and the distribution piece. And frankly, I was actually looking to lift the moratorium on the growing for retail, growing and distribution for retail. That's what I was actually looking for. I'm not exactly sure how comfortable I actually am in terms of, especially being part of the ordinance committee, and we are actually, even we had discussed, I think at our last meeting, in terms of looking at where the funds, and I think I asked you to put that as part of the new ordinance that we were looking at, as far as the designation of the funds for specific places. And those sites were not part of that distribution of funds that I was actually thinking about. I was thinking about more of a global distribution of funds, not specifically.
They're separate, though. You were thinking tax. They were thinking the other 3%.
The HCA is what I was...
Yeah, the community.
Yeah, but you know what? I'm actually I'm thinking about this, that it's the overall income that's coming from for retail marijuana. We can't do it, but we can recommend anything we want to. I mean, people come in front of us all the time asking for funding, and I've done some research on this where a lot of cities across this country designate funding for specific things from their legislative branch. So if we can't do it, I need to see it in black and white where it says the city of Brockton cannot do this.
And I'm not going to advise you that you can't. on
Oh,
You
that.
know,
I looked
because
at
I think, I've looked it up in some cities where specific funds are designated in the budget by the city council for specific projects and things. Congress does it all the time, the state does it all the time, why can't local government do it? You know, so that's the way I see it, and that's why I think it's important for us to look at every single dollar and cents that comes in. And I agree with you. It should not be for friends and families, in the sense, it should be for the entire city. And we ought to look at this as the total funding that comes from the sale of marijuana, whatever it could be the host agreement, it could be whatever monies are generated from this particular enterprise should be looked into as we would do in terms of the overall funding that we're looking for the city. And it should not be, you know, for programs that we like one way or the other. So until such time that somebody tells me we can't do that, I'm going to continue to insist on that, you know. And I think we need to basically, pause for a second, hit the pause button, and specifically with this, and wait until you hear back from the solicitor. A week or two isn't going to kill anybody, you know. And I think we need to seriously hit the pause button and go from there. Because you know what, I am sick and tired of getting my teeth kicked in by the community when we come here and we rubber stamp things. You know, we got to go back and try to figure out exactly how to answer, now we're all of this. I didn't even know that there was a host agreement signed. I didn't know that. You know, and again, we're being asked to do A and B and C at the same time. We have absolutely no idea what's going on in terms of the city itself. You know, I mean, common courtesy says that if you're going to do something like this, then we should have it all in black and white for everybody to see. Otherwise, don't do it. You know, and I think it's shameful in the sense that we are put in this position constantly. You know, where we look foolish in the eyes of the community, because if somebody had asked the question, guess what? 99% of us wouldn't have an answer to give them, and it's shameful.
Yep.
It's shameful, and I think after this is all said and done, I'm going to make a motion that we postpone this until we have an opportunity to seriously look at this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Beauregard, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Counselor. Okay. In good health, to me, you know, is repeatedly demonstrated that they're following through. But I didn't realize, or unless, you know, I haven't been caught up, I spent an awful long time in traffic on West Chestnut Street, and I didn't believe that the other dispensary was, operating at full capacity. Is it?
No.
No. Okay. So to me,
Counselor, you know where that location is, right? The corner of Liberty and West Chestnut.
Yes.
Right. The building is completely rehabbed right now. It's cinder block.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. Okay, so just want to make sure, because to me, when we're talking about this, we seem to be talking about two, and that to me is a little.
Exposure of two.
Yes, but I mean,
There's also too, just so you know, if let's say they do become up and running,
Yes.
The second site, I don't have a proposed agreement from them. So you're also cautioning that they become up and running before the ordinances get passed. That's another caution.
Okay, thank
Attorney
you.
Burke, do you have
because
any
if it was
projection on
just-
when your client will open up at that location?
I believe that they would like to be open sometime at the beginning of December. And I would suggest, Mr. President, that we have a host agreement signed. We have a host agreement signed that both Attorney McCluskey and I negotiated in good faith with the mayor. And one of the things you're going to find in the host agreement that says, if in fact, when you begin your permitting process, you change the host agreement, we will agree to be bound by the subsequent terms of another host agreement. So we're not foreclosing the city. We did this in absolute good faith, openly, and clearly understood that if the situation changes so that the host agreement is modified, we would be bound by the modified host agreement. So we've done this in absolute good faith, and I understand there are some concerns about interaction between the chief executive officer and the council. But what you have here is Mr. Noble, who's been operating successfully and will continue to, I'm sure. John and I have gotten to discuss their operation, and I think it's exceptional. My client has over $500 million in capital right now that they are operating throughout the United States and Canada. They are a very large, successful company. They're going to come here and they're going to do an excellent job. What we're seeking to do is to have the council allow us to begin the process, because I believe that we have prioritization under regulations with the Cannabis Commission, and in doing so, it will provide new revenue for the city. We have executed or would execute an agreement that says, whatever regulations you put in place, we will agree to comply with them. So yes, we'll come before the city council even after we're operating and begin the licensing process, just as you require everyone else. We will pay the application fees, just like everyone else. So we are not being treated differently. We're agreeing to be part of a uniform, cohesive application process. And that's what we're seeking to do in light of transparency, so that the council understands our position.
Thank you, Attorney Burke. Council Burke, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Council. And I'm going to go with my colleague, Councilor Rodriguez, and believe that maybe we need to postpone this because this just seems to be a little, In Good Health is up and running, has demonstrated, a real, how would I say it, professionalism and working with the community. And then the other is a little still vague because their doors haven't opened yet, and it just seems we're a little, I don't know, seems like we're going ahead of ourselves. So
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you.
Any new councilors? Councilor Fowler, you have a
Just, no,
follow-up?
I was just going to summarize, and I did not know, you and I spoke briefly, Attorney Resnick, I didn't know that both of you had been marginalized from any meetings.
Oh, no, I've stated that. That's what's confusing me. I stated that several weeks ago to this body. I gave an update on that, and Dennis was concurring with that.
Okay.
It was a while ago, maybe.
Yeah, but it was stated.
A couple of things. This was, I think, and again, I'm not going to put words in the council president's mouth, but this was a good faith effort to move something forward. We've been excoriated. We've been called the most dilatory body imaginable, trying to prevent any forward progress. I'm certainly not the point man on marijuana, but in terms of working with the mayor and trying to move this forward, this was a good faith effort to do that. I do agree with our legislative council. Whatever we do, and I have no objection to it being postponed, if that's the will of the body, it should be contingent upon all parties, including the mayor, signing off on exactly what we think should be memorialized on paper. I would not, and this isn't targeted at Mayor Carpenter, I would not, for any mayor, just say, okay, we agree, now go do what you want to do. You don't want to give up that level of accountability and oversight. So that's what this is, folks. Whenever it happens, I think it's in fairness to In Good Health, we ought to do this. I think they are leap years ahead of anyone else in terms of their experience in the cannabis industry and their ability to put together a winning business plan in a location that I think benefits them and hopefully will benefit the city. I feel that the other entity that will open up will do the same thing. And so please don't feel, any of you, I have too much respect for you, that anyone's trying to jam anything down your throat. That's not my intent. I just somehow grow weary of everyone saying the council doesn't work with the administration and we don't help. And that's why I thought this was perhaps an opportunity to do something productive. And with that, I don't object to Council Rodriguez or
Well, there's a
anyone else.
motion. I think we let Mr. Burke speak. I think it'd be rightfully so to have Mr. McCluskey speak briefly as well, if no one objects. Attorney McCluskey.
Thank you, councilors. In furtherance of Attorney Burke's comments, and I agree with him fully, we negotiated the host agreement. I came back with some comments which were summarily dismissed because basically the solicitor's office designed the host agreement and said, this is it. This is what you're going to get. And we said, okay, we're not crazy about it entirely, but we'll take it. Furthermore, as I read in the Globe and other periodicals after the fact, and in talking with David Noble, when this was all going on, the host agreement that we signed actually exceeds the state requirements for what is to be paid back to the city. Even with that, we didn't object to that, and we said, that's fine. If that's what you want, that's what you get. So And in addition, as was said tonight, we have agreed in the agreement to change it. In fact, there's language in there, as I recall, if there are other host agreements that can get essentially more money out of you, you got to come back and pay us more money. So I would say, we've put ourselves in a position of, tell us what you want, and we'll do it. And to postpone this tonight, I think, I understand it, but I don't agree with it.
Counselor, let me just be clear. You and Attorney Burke and Mr. Noble and Mr. Green, you're great. Your benefits to the city. But it's not germane to this body, because you might have negotiated in good faith with Mayor Carpenter, but this body did not. This body was not allowed to. This body, vis-a-vis Dennis and myself and Attorney Resnick, sat in. Nothing to do with Mr. Noble and Mr. Green or the two attorneys. So it's not fair to say, John, tonight that you would be able to do that, because the person that negotiates is the mayor, not this body. So this body is going to be left out in the cold again, because there's a proven track record that happens. So I don't see how we couldn't postpone it. We need to postpone it, since the solicitor's office hasn't reached back out to our attorney. So attorney to attorney, and you guys can appreciate that, we can't act as the client until we hear back from our attorney. Our attorney did not hear from the city solicitor. So
One point, we maxed it out. That's all I'm saying.
you maxed what out?
We maxed out the amount that we can pay.
Right, but what you're saying is there's a clause in there that you have to go back and match any other host agreement, future host agreements. This body will not be able to participate in that matter.
No, what I'm saying is that under the state regulations, we are above what the state requires for payment. And the state, you've probably seen the articles, they say, there's lots of towns that have eked out more money from people illegally. The city did that in a little way here, and we agreed with it. But we are maxed out as far as what we're legally obliged to pay. And no matter what we do here, I don't think that the city of Brockton can go back and say, you've got to pay more. If things change down the road and the regulations change, we've agreed to go along with it. But I hear you, Counselor, but basically where we are as far as the level of payment is the most you could possibly require us to do.
Now, I'm not even talking about the financials. I'm talking about the situation of negotiation. Jim had mentioned in good faith. I bet it was in good faith, but we weren't party to that. Nor will we ever be party to that, because we're not the mayor of Brockton. So it's kind of a waste of time to talk about that, and I maybe have a bad taste in my mouth because it was a waste of our time. But tonight's matter, filed by Mr. Fowle and Mr. Ianieri, is heard, but I think our attorney already said she needs to get a response back from Phil and Megan Bridges, and that hasn't happened as of this time, right?
Yeah, if I could, I just have one thing to just add. Thank you, Attorney McCluskey. It's just that as the attorney for the city council, I have a unique position here, is that the contract is between In Good Health and the city of Brockton. The city of Brockton aspect of that contract is negotiated by the mayor through the solicitor's office. They gave me the courtesy of showing me that agreement. They asked for my input. I don't necessarily think what's there is harmful to the city. I don't think it fully exposes the city to really any detriment. But there are parts of it that I cannot be involved in because it's a contract. But I can only be involved in as it relates to what this committee does as finance and what the ordinance committee does and what the full city council does. So my counsel to you is that this order relates to a contract, and I cannot preserve your rights, your thoughts, your comments into that contract, because that needs to be preserved by the city solicitor's office and the mayor, and I just have not heard back to them. And I wouldn't have in any event, because I'd need to hear your comments today in order to advocate those comments to the solicitor's office, see if it even goes into the agreement, and then I would advise you. What was being proposed is to have this go first and then have all of that happen. And I can't in good faith tell you that I think that what you say today as a city council, if that's the route that's taken, I can't in good faith say that, sure, anything you say today will go into that contract. I can't counsel you on that.
Council Monahan, please.
So who will have the final say on what goes into that contract? It's not going to be us. It's going to be the mayor.
It's going to be the
And the
mayor,
solicitor.
but you have a rubber stamp because you have to lift this moratorium as a body.
Right, but if we lift it, and what happens is afterwards, with the city solicitor and the mayor, whatever we say here, other than lifting the moratorium, nothing, other than when we finish the ordinances, they're gonna have to abide by whatever we put in the ordinances. The zoning doesn't make any difference. And whatever happens in the host agreement is just what the solicitor's office and the mayor has to say. So anything we do tonight, all we're doing is agreeing to lift the moratorium, and they're agreeing that anything that we finalize in our ordinances they will be agreeable to.
Assuming, one, that they enter into that, and two, yes, that absolutely occurs, but then you have an operation of retail marijuana adult use sales without regulation of time and even though you can't do place, you can still regulate time and manner. The current ordinances that are being vetted out have a whole level of overview and all the security requirements. And of course, they're also done by the state, but it does allow the license commission to pop in and check out everything else. It allows the license commission or the city council to respond to complaints. We will not have that in the first couple months because the ordinance will not be enacted. So, yes, that all happens, but also that happens.
Yeah, so, yeah, okay. I don't think it's a bad thing to do. If we did that, I think it would all come together, but,
It could have absolutely no implications whatsoever.
and I think Council Fowler's right. If we could get something going, get some revenue in here sooner, but, I mean, I know, it's sort of a wishy-washy type of thing. It's good in one hand, bad, not fair on the other hand, but nothing we do tonight's gonna be, if we lift it, we lift it. I don't think it's a bad thing.
And then the other thing that could happen here, Council, is if you vote unfavorably, if you vote favorably, I still got a week. I've got some time to work with the solicitor's office. I got time, so you could take that route. I just don't know what's going to happen. I was involved in the host agreements, then all of a sudden they were signed. So I can't tell you, I can't predict what would happen in a week. I'm available to help advocate what the city council wants to see over the next week before the vote comes before the full city council at the next meeting. I just don't know if that's going to happen.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Follow up with Council Darrencourt and then Cruz, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In regard to what we've been discussing tonight, I feel like there's a possibility for us to actually move along with this, but with the condition of taking into consideration some of our comments in regard to this. That's my view on it. I mean, based on what you said, I think that we do need revenue and stuff like that, but I would hope some of our comments will take into considerations to next move. Because according to you, it seems like there's no wrong way or good way about this, regardless how we vote on it. But I strongly believe that, In Good Health has been doing a wonderful job, and also, by giving them an opportunity to sort of make a move could be very good to the city. But I would hope that, our comments truly take into considerations. The moment you hear from the city solicitor, you mentioned some of our concerns and some of the things that we propose. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Council Cruz, follow up, please.
Thank you. To be honest with you, a little bit what I'm going to say now is a little more philosophical than anything else. I'm confused how, Councilor Darrencourt just said, hopefully you can take back some of our comments. We're a legislative body. Somebody's comments don't mean a thing. I don't know how, and I'm glad we have you, but I don't know how you can be negotiating something that this council has not voted on. This council, you might think this, and you might think this, and you might think this, until we pass something. You can't, even sitting in on designing the host agreements, that's not the will of the council. In this case, most of us are pretty close to being in agreement on the major parts of what we want. But until this body votes, that's why we don't negotiate, because we can't negotiate. We are a legislative body. And to have our attorney there negotiating for us, you're really negotiating for the ideas of a few people. And again, in this case, they're generally well accepted by us. and I think most of us are going to be on pretty much the same base when we finish this. But I'm very uncomfortable when we try to negotiate things that we haven't voted on, because the will of this council, it might be 6-5, but that is then the will of the council. It might be 11-0, that's the will of the council. Something that doesn't pass, but one councilor likes this, another councilor wants that in there, that's not law, ordinance, or anything. That's just somebody's opinion. One person's opinion at the time, and I'm uncomfortable to have our attorney there for a legislative body trying to speak for us as a group when we're not a group until we've voted on something, till we have passed, and I'm talking on any issue, not just the marijuana issue. To try to be negotiating what one council likes or another council likes, am I wrong?
No, I don't disagree that there was no place for me to be involved in the negotiations. That's why I said they sent it to me
And in fact-
as a courtesy for me to review. But what I'm saying is that this order is a legislative order. And it is contingent upon a contract between the city and IGH. Well, it's actually not. As written, it's not contingent. It's actually a blanket order. Nothing requires IGH or the city to enter into that agreement. If they had an agreement that said, subject to the passage of lift of the moratorium, that this agreement, takes effect should the city council lift the moratorium, then I think that's an easier counsel to give you, because then my concerns are only to just say, you're just allowing an operation to operate without local legislation. But all of those agreements, yes, we're going to do it, yes, we're going to do it. If you lift it tonight, or I get the next city council, that's not the way I've read the email chains. It's that they'll do it after. They wanted this to be suspension of rules. They wanted it to happen right away.
But you couldn't do that anyhow, it's a committee, so.
Correct. So,
Right,
well,
as of
yeah.
Monday night, and to be honest with you, I wanted to vote yes on this tonight, but I really am uncomfortable. Until we vote on something, there is nothing that, you're not speaking for me, you're not speaking for Councilor Farwell, you're speaking for the City Council of Brockton. And until we vote on something, you can't speak for us.
Correct. And so I'm just saying is that
this
order is, it's not contingent upon
There'd be nothing to,
nothing.
it's just saying that basically
You
the
just
mayor's
lift it.
office can
And then they
say
go
how to
forward.
run.
Yep. They have the host
Now,
agreement. There is that.
we could add some lines, and we could add time restraints if that was what we thought we were going to be at. I just think,
I don't know if you could do it in this order.
and because of that, I was going to vote yes to try and lift the moratorium, and probably am going to say, let's postpone this, because until we finish our work, I'm uncomfortable that there's, a couple of people here and a couple of people there getting 2 cents put in. And again, in this case, we are pretty much all on the same page, and it's really nuts and bolts that we have to finish. But just the idea that I'm uncomfortable with the idea of you speaking for the council when we haven't spoken yet. And until we vote, we haven't spoken. We're giving ideas, but we haven't spoken. So it's more philosophical, but thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Rodriguez, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I go back to what I was saying earlier. We're being asked to lift this moratorium. That's what we're being asked to do. And the entire planet knows we're working on an ordinance to regulate retail marijuana in the city of Brockton. At the same time, a host agreement was signed between the parties. And this is the problem that I'm having. Because we don't have an ordinance in place, that host agreement technically is being or should be viewed as the guiding instructions as to how this thing is going to function. And I kind of agree with what Council Cruz was saying, but at the same time, this is where we differ a little bit. Since we don't have an ordinance, we're putting together a host agreement that should kind of serve as an ordinance to guide this until the ordinance comes into play. And this is why I think that we should have seen that. When this order came in today, a copy of that host agreement should have come with it, so that we knew or we had an idea what we're lifting or for what purpose we're lifting. And that did not happen. I know some members on this body have a copy, or some choose not to have it, or some choose not to care whether or not they have it or not. I am not of that opinion. I want to see it because, again, we're working on the ordinance to do this. And if we're working on the ordinance, if there's some sort of a contract that will touch bases or will affect that ordinance one way or the other, and it will affect it. Because if you already agreed to do something with one party, and you're setting the rules for how you're going to govern this going forward, it has a play to play. So therefore, I'm going to stand by what I said earlier. I'm going to vote, I'm going to make a motion to postpone this until our next financial council meeting, and until such time that we actually get a copy of the official host agreement that was signed, since we're being asked to okay some guidelines that will go forward in terms of the regulation of retail marijuana until such time that the ordinance takes effect.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Derrencourt had a follow-up, and then Councilor Falwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's kind of like based on what you said, as the council attorney, you claim that during the negotiation, you got to a point where you were excluded. And I'm somewhat confused. I mean, it's like if you are there to represent us, and then you get kicked out. What's the reason?
So the reason why I was involved is because if a contract is for a certain period of time, it does need to come before the city council for final approval. It was not determined at that time whether or not these contracts would be for 1 year or for 3 years. I actually agreed that a 1-year contract was in the city's best interest. It takes away the approval from the city council, but because this is a new operation, we didn't know if, what was being asked was too much, too little. Was it going to discourage applicants from coming into the city, or was it going to be driving way too many people to come operate in the city? I don't disagree that it was a 1 year, but at the time when we went and met about what would be in this host agreement, my large concern was that if a contract of the city conflicted with what the city ordinances were. I had seen drafts from other communities, what they've used for host agreements. I was not certain what would be in those host agreements.
Yeah, I mean, to go back to what my colleague, Council Cruz, said earlier in regard to you speaking for us based on what we said or based on what we voted on. But
the mayor came here and spoke before the council. I don't remember if it was finance or if it was at a general body of the city council, and he said that he wanted to work with us.
It was a FinCom. Attorney Nazarella stood up, and he adamantly said that this body would not have any say in it because, in his belief, it would be a year or two. And we objected to that, and Mayor Carpenter came down to the podium and said, in the spirit of working collaboration through the president, Mr. Iannieri, he would have Attorney Resnick, the president, and a designee participate in the negotiation and review. We had one meeting, Gene, and then we weren't invited, and then it got executed.
Based on that statement, if it is true, and again, I'm going to ask you the same questions, why did you get kicked out?
I don't know. I don't necessarily
know. So if you don't know,
I don't know necessarily if I got kicked out or if just what had already been worked on past the legislative aspect of what the ordinance committee was going to do, and then went into really what the city would do, perhaps financially and contractually. So I might not have served any purpose on that second half. I have no idea.
I mean, it's like one of the things that somewhat, I don't want to say concern me, is the fact that, the way this is going on, it makes all of us look bad. It seems like we are the problem in regard to not doing certain things for the city. I mean, I am 100% in favor of this, but based on the way this is being presented to us, and in regard to the host agreement, based on what Council Rodriguez just said, I think that, we have to actually find out what's going on. I mean, I haven't seen the host agreement yet. I would like to read it. Haven't seen it. I mean, how do I vote on something without even knowing what it is? And again, that's why I asked you that question earlier.
To lift it, though.
No, you don't lift, so you don't lift, you actually put the host agreement into effect.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
But you would do that anyways. If you passed your ordinances, you would do that anyway.
So it's like without having the knowledge whatsoever in this, I mean, I think it's somewhat, I mean, I'm the kind of person that goes by reasons and understanding. So as of right now, although I do believe that In Good Health has been doing a wonderful job, but I think it is wise to wait and see what happens. So if you are this, the council attorney, feel like you have some concern, and given the fact that you sent a letter to the city solicitor, and of course you haven't heard anything, I mean, how could we possibly go along and then move this? So for me, I think it just, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Council Fowler, you had a follow-up?
Just to follow up, and I would ask our counsel to jump in here if I'm wrong. Once we have 8 licensees operating, my understanding is, under the law, the mayor can sit down with those 8 entities and execute a host community agreement, possibly have $1 million or more than $1 million in a funny fund to distribute however he or she wants to distribute it, however they write it into the host community agreement. It could be for education, it could be for drug prevention, it could be for public safety, it could be for economic development, but under the current law, if I'm right, we have absolutely no say in those host community agreements.
That's correct.
Is that an accurate statement?
That is accurate, yeah.
Okay, so the mayor obviously has excluded you both because, let's face it, if you got money, you got power, and you got politics, and it's a great mix. To my colleague from Ward 1, I at least in this exercise, we weren't negotiating anything. We were trying to find out,
I never even sent any emails to
what
these
was
attorneys.
were there contingencies that would be acceptable to this body and could be presented to this body for your acceptance or amendment or rejection that would allow us to go forward lifting the moratorium? Because I agree with you. I wouldn't want Attorney Resnick to negotiate a particular issue unless it was a vote of the body, but that's what we were trying to do. Having heard all of that, I got to tell you, folks, we have quite a few issues ahead of us, because if this industry becomes as lucrative as everyone is saying it's going to be, and you have 8 entities, and they're going to contribute 3% of their revenues for the first 5 years, someone is going to have a lot of funny money to play with. And I think it's too bad that it doesn't come into the community in the form of a grant to be accepted and then appropriated by us. But that's the law. There's not much we can do about
It's
it.
3, so it's 3%.
3% of-
and then the 3% tax, which I don't recall if the host agreement provides for where the 3% in tax goes. I don't recall.
But the other 3% is discretionary at the chief executive, and that could be millions. Could be millions. Thank you. I thank you for your patience tonight, colleagues.
Councilors, my 2 cents to this, I just don't think that the perception is something that I would be favorable of. I think we passed collectively a moratorium to give ourselves time. There's 5 of us that sit on the city council ordinance committee. We're working hard. We have another meeting on the 18th at 6 o'clock here. We're really close on one component, and then we're working on the zoning component. I just think that if we lift it specific to the medical marijuana providers In Good Health, which again is a good business in the city of Brockton, and the next one is a trickle down, right? The first one to benefit would be In Good Health, right? The next one isn't even operational until maybe December, according to Attorney Burke. So they're the second beneficiary, right? And then the other ones are God knows when, right? So I as one feel that the perception isn't that beneficial, but also I think that there could be an argument by other applicants, the other 6 applicants, that either you're acting in a favorable manner or there's unjust enrichment. And I just think that we're charged as an ordinance committee to do a purpose. We're working on it. We're working with our attorney. I think we're almost there, and I think we'll be there by the end of the year. I really do. So I understand what Mr. Fowler and Mr. Yaneri were saying is maybe a little test case to see how lucrative it really is, and kind of flesh it out, because they've been operational and they've no complaints. But at the end of the day, I think there's some issues that could really reflect poorly on this body. I really do. So,
The other thing that I can counsel the city council on is that if you pass your ordinances relative to the time and manner, which is the one we're just calling the licensing and regulation, if that gets passed, then you can proceed on this lift, because I don't think zoning will have anything to do with them. So if it comes out an ordinance favorably after the 18th, you have a couple of readings, you might be able to lift this moratorium sometime early November. So it's not like a wait for everyone else. If you want them to start earlier, I think you have the avenue to do that if the regulations come out of ordinance after the next meeting.
I'll make a motion to postpone this till the next finance meeting.
Second.
With the stipulation that the city solicitor's office send us all copies of the existing agreements that have been entered into.
the motion made, it was properly second. All in favor of postponing? All opposed? That matter carries. It's postponed with the stipulation stated by Mr. Cruz.
You guys have any copies or posters?
Any other business before us tonight as a committee? Council Beauregard,
Well, I just wanted a couple moments of personal privilege.
you have them.
Thank you, sir. Okay, first one is we had the Downtown Brockton Fest, and once again, here's a group of volunteers doing some great stuff downtown. We had over 800 people in attendance. I will say the weather helped, but it was just absolutely phenomenal, and it was a very positive, upbeat situation for downtown in many capacities. Second thing is, I have my Ward 5 meeting on October 3rd at 7 p.m. at the Brockton Main Library. And the third thing actually is very distressing and rather alarming. Some of my colleagues and I were at the Traffic Commission meeting the other night, where we were very disappointed to hear that at this point, that if I'm to understand, that there are no assigned police officers to traffic. That's what we were told by Captain Hallisey on that evening. Apparently, they have other assignments. Well, like many of us in this community, just driving around here is some sort of a challenge. That excludes those that have children at school bus stops, etc. I am not alone in believing and saying that oftentimes we get requests for stop signs, speeding signs, slow down signs, etc. So on that evening, it was expressed that we were a little disappointed. No, excuse me, very disappointed, and we were hoping that maybe there could be, how would I say, a change in plans, because just coming down West Chestnut Street this evening, there was a bad car accident. There were cars backed up for miles, and that's, hopefully no one was hurt. But anyway, I don't know if you as the acting president will be going to speak with the mayor, but maybe there could be, how would I say it, a change in, how would I say it, this decision, because really, all residents, all ages have concerns and complaints about traffic and speeding, et cetera. Thank you.
I agree. In light of the anniversary of the tragic death of Mr. Yancey, the unsolved crime, I mean, yes, absolutely, Ann. And I will call the mayor and reiterate that, because, it's health and safety, and it's a serious, I mean, people drive crazy in this city. So thank you for that.
Mr.
Council Cruz, followed by Council Ezak, please.
Just a word on that, and that hasn't happened yet, but Captain Hallisey did state that they were going to be reassigned temporarily to do some temporary other work. I have a call into Chief Crowley, because, of course, the mayor doesn't run the police department, so I do have a call into Chief Crowley to, and my question will be, some of these people are paid through grants for traffic enforcement, so I don't see how he could take them off of that work to begin with. So when I do get in touch with, when Captain Crowley and I played a little phone tag today, so we'll, I'll get back to us next Monday night and let you know, and hopefully that won't be happening. Councilor Monahan and I are on the Traffic Commission, and it was a bit of a shock to hear that it hasn't happened yet. Those officers are still assigned to traffic detail, but they are going to be doing some things on some background checks and some other things for the academy. So they are being taken off of that, but again, I have a call into Chief Crowley, and I'll get back to you next Monday night and let you know
Thank you,
what I hear.
Council Cruz. Thank you. Council Ezak, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A moment of personal
Absolutely.
privilege. I'd just like to invite everybody, this Thursday, October 4th, is a Ward 7 meeting. It's at the Raymond School at 125 Oak Street at 7 p.m. And a few items on the agenda One of them is going to be we have some new development coming into the ward, so there'll be some presentation and some discussion. Everyone is invited. And second of all, one of my favorite events in the ward is coming up. Tower Fest is this Saturday, October 6th, from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. at DW Fields Park. There's always lots of fun activities for the kids, for everyone, actually, for the whole family. It's the DW Fields Park Association has raffles. I know there's food, all kinds of great things happening, so hope to see everybody there this Saturday. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Counselor. Counselors, again, next Monday is Columbus Day, so we'll be meeting on Tuesday, full city council, 7 o'clock here. And again, I will be speaking to the council president tomorrow, and I'll pass on your best wishes collectively. Mr. Fowler?
Just a moment of personal privilege.
Yes.
Prior to Councilor Azak's meeting being scheduled, our open forum, second and last one for residents to talk about marijuana recommendations, suggestions, will be at the Arnone School on Thursday, October 4th, 6:30 to 8. And so anyone who hasn't come in, people listening at home, we welcome you. Whatever you have to say, we'd appreciate hearing from you.
Thank you, Counsel. Anybody else? We're adjourned.
Thank you.